Good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Here we are in Spain, where suddenly the thermostat has been turned up and we have a mild, what it will be in centigrade, 35 degrees centigrade, which I understand is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm cooking a little bit as I talk to you today, hence the slight change of attire, and you get a full bonus view of my aortic dissection scar, which I think is quite a neat segue into telling you, as I'm always asked to do, that my name is John Quick. I'm a fellow aortic dissection survivor. I had a sudden type A and then subsequently a type B dissection. I have a artificial aortic valve, titanium. Part of my ascending aorta is a prosthesis, and the rest of it has been managed with defensive medication for 18 years. So that is, as I've said before, is one of the things that I can hopefully bring to this show, is perhaps slightly more road miles on the clock, some of the things I've learned along the way. And as part of that learning process, this caused me to change direction in my life. And I started to study more psychology courses, which I'd always been interested in doing, getting certifications and starting to work with people in trauma and with PTSD, and which is particularly relevant to obviously this condition. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome today Mark Martucci from the Pacific West Coast, who's joining me. And just a little bit about Mark. I understand from a little previous chat we've had that Mark had a aortic dissection 7 years ago now, which was a type A dissection and a type B down to his iliacs. But here he is 7 years on, leading, I think, a very full and interesting life. So I'd like to welcome him aboard.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you,
Mark.
John. Thank you, John. I think the difference right now is I'm in Southern California, and you can see by the way I'm dressed, it's about 62 degrees Fahrenheit here. So I'm not showing my scar today, but I probably
Pity.
will. Hopefully I will in another month or so when it warms up here.
Okay. So if you're happy to do this, why don't we begin by you telling us a little bit about what happened to you? My understanding is it occurred completely out of the blue, like mine, without any warning.
Yep. Yeah, John, we have a lot in common. Mine was also sudden onset. I was in a gym on vacation with my family in Kauai on a Sunday of all places. And I was doing an exercise that I'd done hundreds of times, and I felt a tightening in my chest. My back locked up. Told my daughter, who was in the gym with me, that I probably wrenched my back, and then I became disoriented. My son was out for a run. He came in to see me, and he said, "Dad, there's something wrong. We're gonna call the ER," which was fortunate because the guy that was working in the gym that I was working out in said, "You know what? You're from the mainland. You're dehydrated. Go have an apple and a Gatorade and go to sleep, and you'll feel better."
Fine margins,
Subsequently,
huh?
yeah, it was very, very close. I was taken to a community hospital, and if anybody has been to Kauai on a Sunday in a community hospital, you're probably right about what you're thinking. It could be a bit of a challenge, but fortunately, the ER physician was excellent. My wife was on the phone with a cousin of mine who is an ER physician and very, very well educated on anything ER, specifically dissection, and he knew immediately that they needed to do a CT scan. Fast forward about an hour and a half, I met on Zoom with a neurologist who ruled out a stroke. That's what they first thought. Now
So
it
you were
ended
able to
up that
do a Zoom call at that time?
I was in the ER in a room, and I could vaguely remember almost being interviewed by a neurologist. and he ruled out stroke in about 5 minutes. And then they wheeled me in to have the CT, put me on a plane. Not a lot of really high tech medical facilities in Kauai.
Mm.
So they airlifted my wife and I to Honolulu, where Dr. Moreno was a CT surgeon that happened to be on call that Sunday in Honolulu. He was waiting with his team. And I don't remember much that day, but I do remember 2 or 3 things: being on the plane,
Mm.
landing, and then the quick conversation I had with the surgeon that ended up repairing my type A dissection, which, as you mentioned, was type A and then type B.
Right.
So they replaced the ascending with a Dacron
Hmm.
sleeve, and the type B is being medically managed. I spent, like most people that have gone through this, I spent 7 days in the hospital in Honolulu, um, with my family. My wife and children stayed,
Okay.
and 7 days later, I got out of the hospital, and we decided to stay for another 3 days just to take it easy and relax, and flew back to Los Angeles.
Mm. So just to roll back a little bit, is and when you went to the community hospital, what and the consultant or whatever it was, the doctor has immediately, fortunately, identified the issue. Were there any specifics that could be useful for us to pull out of that? Because clearly there's still a lot of work to be done around diagnosis, isn't there? Because
Yeah.
we often don't, present in the same ways. I mean, I just collapsed and I lost consciousness. But then when I got on the phone to, in England, 999, I wasn't particularly describing anything. I think I was probably pretty disorientated. But it was only really that when I got to the hospital in West London, that for whatever reason they just decided to put me straight into a CT scan, and that was clearly critical.
You know what, John, looking back, I think, and from what my wife and children have told me, I was very disoriented almost immediately after it happened. It was severe chest pain, severe back pain, not excruciating, but pretty severe. And
Mm.
then I was disoriented. I couldn't remember where I was, how I got there, couldn't remember I couldn't remember who the president was at the time. I couldn't remember phone numbers. So that, I think, that led them to believe that it could have been a stroke. That's why when I got to
Yes.
the ER, the first thing they did was check me for a stroke. And
Right.
in hindsight, it was obviously because I lost the blood flow going through my carotids up to my brain, because I
Yeah.
dissected into the carotids also.
Okay. Um. Yes. So here we are, 7 years on. And just to check in, as this is, also a therapeutic Thursday, how is it for you to go back through that with me? Because as you tell it to me, I can feel some triggers just from, I'm moved by your story.
You know, it's therapeutic for me to talk about it. I
Okay.
would rather talk about it than put it in a box and keep it on the shelf. So for me, it's a little bit more therapeutic, I think, because I am able to talk about it, and I like to talk about it, and in the hopes that I can help someone else.
Yes. And has that always been your nature, that you've generally believed in kind of
Yes,
getting things out there and talking about it?
yes.
Yes.
Sometimes too much. Sometimes that can get you into trouble.
Okay. Well, I won't necessarily ask you to provide
No.
examples of that. Um, and how is it then, having had this experience, which is, like a kind of emergency stop in life, isn't it? I don't know whether you use that phrase in driving, but suddenly in
Yes.
your life the brakes are slammed on, aren't they? And you kind of metaphorically hit the windscreen, if not go through it. Um,
Yep.
are you happy to walk us through some of the ways in which it's changed your life?
Yes. I think I've learned to appreciate things that I might have previously taken for granted, be it
Mm.
relationships, nature. I happen to live near the beach, and I love the water and I love the beach, and I see things through a different lens, and I think it's a lens of gratitude. I think once you get through that stage where you're feeling sorry for yourself, and I did. I mean, when the first thing I did when I woke up is, why me? How did this happen to me? I was in very, very good shape. I ate well, exercised a lot. And when I woke up, I was just dumbfounded on how this could happen to me. So once you get, I didn't let that pity party last too long, until I really started to feel myself, which was about 6 months. I think then I transitioned to really understanding what I had been through and how fortunate I was to survive it. And as I
Mm.
learned more, maybe like you, John, but I had no idea what an aortic dissection. I knew what the aorta was. I had no idea
Mm.
what an aortic dissection was.
No.
And then when I started to do some research and look at the mortality rates, I realized how fortunate I am and how everything had to fall into place, which it did, for me to survive.
Yes.
And that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, only the to comment that even now, I think people find the word dissection uh, quite confusing in the context of this. It doesn't really describe, what happens or what the condition is, does it? You know,
No, no.
um, unfortunately, medical terms can tend to be like that. I mean, how many people actually know out there what an aneurysm is and that you can have one in your chest? I
No.
still regularly have to explain to people and have to find kind of equivalences for aneurysms by sort of saying, well, it's a bit of a bubble, or which is formed in the chest, or it looks, imagine a hernia, kind of like all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And language can be quite difficult for it, can't it?
Yes.
um but you also said about in terms of sort of changing your life, um so just hearing you say that all sounds like a very positive thing then. Yes, for you.
It was absolutely very, very positive for me. Um, Understanding how important relationships are, I've made an effort to reconnect with people that, because life got in the way and work and
Mm.
kids and family, I might have lost touch with some people that meant a lot to me over the years. And since the dissection, I've reconnected with a lot of people that were in my life 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I don't want to go back any further than 40 years because that will really show my age. But,
So, all
I
right,
mean,
I
a
won't
lot.
grill you too hard on that. So
That's
you're
okay.
okay.
That's okay. I'm proud of it.
Yes. So, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But it's kind of, is that the sort of thing that, sometimes we need to get the kind of thunderbolt, from up wherever it comes from, to kind of like, whoa, get a,
Yeah.
let's look at life a little bit differently.
Yes. Absolutely. And for me, living, living with gratitude, being grateful for what I have and focusing on what I have, not what I don't have, right? The
Mm.
friends that I have, the family that I have, the relationships that I have. I think it's always, it's easy to look across the street and see what somebody else has, but I've learned that that's not really important. What's important is, those people in my maybe inner circle.
Yes. So that's very empowering, isn't it? Do you think that by getting to that kind of place, we then develop our own kind of life resilience? Because there are going to be issues that come along with this, aren't there? And there are going to be
Yeah.
some setbacks. We're going to have good days, perhaps some bad days. Um, but by being able to be more accepting, which it sounds like you've made that journey, do you find that you're able to be more easy come, easy go?
Much, much. Yes. I think, I mean, I think I mentioned this when we had spoken initially. I am a type A personality.
Hmm.
I am, and I will always be a type A
Would you just
personality. But I think,
maybe tell people what a type A personality is? So in case they don't know,
I mean,
what?
I'm an extrovert. I'm a people person. I like to talk. I can tend to get emotional, excited, but I think I've learned to temper all that, not to allow my blood pressure to go up,
Hmm.
or not allowed, and are there still times? Yeah, not nearly as many where, I might get very excited.
Yeah.
So I try to be much more even keeled.
Hmm. So does that mean
And
kind
part of
of you're if that was the family speaking and your relatives, they'd say, Mark, you're much easier to be around or something like that.
my kids would probably say that. I think my wife would too. Yeah.
Ah,
Certainly my siblings and my, nieces and nephews, all of whom I'm very close to.
yes.
Yeah,
Interesting. And from our chat, well, some of the things that stood out was that you did have cardiac therapy, didn't you? Cardiac rehab when pretty
I
much
did.
straight away afterwards. Yeah. Can you walk us through
Um,
that a bit?
yes. Well, when I got home, since, many people um, end up having their surgery and then they're followed by that surgeon. For me, was much different, right? I had my emergency surgery in Hawaii. I flew back to Los Angeles. I had to find a cardiologist. I had to find a surgeon to follow me. And the second cardiologist that I sat with, whom I really, really liked, and ended up, he was my cardiologist until he retired 2 years ago. So for the first 5 years, he was my cardiologist, and he was the one that suggested cardiac rehab. The surgeon really knew
Mm,
nothing about it, which still surprises me a little bit, but the
mm,
cardiologist had a little bit more experience in sending people to, I assume, had more experience in sending people to cardiac rehab. And for me, and someone that had exercised his entire life, it was very, very important for me to be able to get to a controlled environment where I knew I was closely monitored. Because, like most
mm.
people, I was afraid to walk up the stairs. I was
Yeah, yeah.
afraid, I was afraid to get on a bike. I was afraid to walk too fast because, you know, I
That
didn't
is
want
such an
to.
issue for everybody, isn't it? Or it can be.
Yes,
Knowing
yeah,
what the
it
limits
is.
are, knowing what we can step into. Yeah, it's a kind of whole new world.
Yeah. And I still think, even to this day, John, that's one of the biggest challenges that people face when
Mm.
they begin the recovery is how much can I push myself, or should I push myself? There's how much weight can I lift?
Yeah.
So for me, cardiac rehab, and I had to fight with my insurance company, and I had to have the cardiologist who wrote the prescription for me to go to cardiac rehab. He had to recode it a little bit differently.
So
So,
let me just get my head around that. So there you are. You've come out of this, near-death experience, and you have to, when your energy's on the floor, probably, and you have to fight with your insurance company to be given this.
well, yeah, I wouldn't say fight, but yeah, I mean, we went back and forth quite a bit.
Mm. So they
They
were
denied
basically
it.
would rather not pay.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, in the US, most insurance companies, my experience is, initially they'll say no, and then you have to go back
Mm.
and go back. And sometimes it's nothing more than the physician has to recode it. When they send it to the insurance company, they have a code. And he recoded it, I think, a few times until they finally said, "Oh, okay, we'll accept it." So,
Okay.
what I've told people in the support groups that I am involved in is, the first answer will likely be no, and
Mm.
depending on your insurance, it may eventually be no, but keep pushing and go back to your doctor and have them push. And but for me, being able to go to that, be in that environment, it was probably one of the best things that I did to get me over that hump. And yeah, I think I started to go probably 12 weeks, 10 to 12 weeks after my surgery.
Right, 12 weeks, so 3 months, yeah. So your
Yeah.
your scar was healing then, the bone was growing back on. That was
Yep.
probably reasonably done by then. So
Yes.
probably yes, in a place where you could start to go. So I'm interested to know what's inside cardiac rehab. What's it made up of? Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, there are fewer aortic dissection patients in there than there are open heart surgery patients in there, or people that have had stents put in. So um, it's when I was there, I think I might have met, and I was there for 3 months. I think I met two other people that had dissections. Most of the people were there for heart issues. Um, but it was the facility that I went to was part of a hospital. It was run by nurses. Most of them had already been cardiac nurses or ICU nurses, so they were very familiar with the sensitivity. As soon as you went in, they put you on a blood pressure machine, checked your blood pressure, and then they slowly walked you through some cardio, so some cardiovascular, but very,
Hmm.
very slow on a bike just to get yourself moving, and then eventually very light weights. But there was
Okay.
somebody there was somebody with you, and they would monitor your heart. They would monitor your heart rate, and they monitored my blood pressure. And there were several times they sent me home. They said,
Right.
"You know
Oh,
what,
so it
Mark?
wasn't residential then.
No, it wasn't. No, no, it was actually at a hospital.
Okay. So you would go home at the end of each day and then come back the next day.
Yeah, yeah. I would
Yeah.
go 3 days a week. I'd go 3 days a week for an hour each, and I wasn't working at the time. I was on
Mm.
disability, so for me, I looked forward to that more than anything.
I bet. It's something actually I feel I miss because mine happened in England and in London. And then after the period of the kind of recovery, I would then came back to Spain. And, somehow that slipped between, the gap, as it were. And I think if I knew what I knew now, I would push for that much more. And it may be a difference between the two countries' healthcare
Yes.
systems as well. Um, So yes, okay. So gradually they step up the cardio, they step up the weights, do they step up the intensity?
Yes. Yep. And at the same time, they're monitoring your blood pressure, your heart rate, and if they see something that
Yeah.
looks, a little bit odd, then you'll stop. And a
Right.
couple times they sent me home and said, they would reach out to my doctor, the cardiologist, and they would say, you know what, when Mark does this, his blood pressure, and I know you don't want his blood pressure above this level while he's rehabilitating. We see it spiking up here, so you may need to tweak his meds, or maybe we just need him to come back in a week. And it was a
Mm,
combination. Sometimes I just took a couple of days off or a week off.
yeah.
Others, they might have adjusted my meds.
Interesting. So quite interesting close control, sort of tweaking, isn't it? Which is
Yeah.
um and was there a swimming pool?
There was not a pool, but I did start to swim about 6 months after.
Yes. For
But
me,
they
that
did
was
not have
my
a pool.
rehab. The swimming
Was
pool.
it?
Oh, completely. I couldn't recommend it more to people. That's what I decided to do. The first time I got in the pool, I just about managed a length, and then it was
Yeah.
two, and then it was four. But I just think it's just magnificent from the point of view of
Yeah.
cardio. You're not going to strain anything. You're horizontal. So, again, less
Yeah.
strain on the heart. It's so
Yep.
easy to stop and start again and recover. Um, Great.
Yep.
Okay, and when we were talking also, you spoke about therapy itself. Yes, and
Yep.
you're a believer in, as you've said, in talking things out. And tell us about your experiences in that, if you will.
I was a person. When I dissected, I was 57 years old. I had never seen a therapist, and probably should have for, just life stuff happens. I probably should have,
Mm.
but the dissection was the impetus for me to find a therapist, and I found one that was local. And I probably saw her once a week for 6 or 8 months,
Mm-hmm.
and she really helped me think through, um, what had happened, how it happened, why it happened, but more importantly, how I can react to what I had been through. Because I was still in a little bit of shock,
Right.
and I didn't quite understand how it happened. I didn't have an organization like Aortic Hope. I didn't know anything about John Ritter Foundation. So I was kind of on my own searching on Facebook, and I really needed somebody to let me talk and at times cry and let me share my fears. I was not comfortable doing that at home, because I felt like my wife and my kids had gone through enough trauma watching what I went through for, the 3 or 4 days I was unconscious in the
Mm.
hospital before I woke up. And even after that, they were all traumatized. So for me, it was an opportunity to sit down with someone, shed a few tears, really open up about how I was feeling, how scared I was, to go back to work, to walk, to run, to bike.
Okay. So can I just come in there? Because there's something quite
Yes.
important, I think, there for everyone. And always sort of remembering that what we're often trying to do is give people kind of universalities out of this. What can everybody take away from this? So I'm interested in that point where somewhere you sort of decided, having never been to therapy in your life, that you needed to go and talk to somebody. What were you specifically looking to get to the bottom of there and undo, unwrap, understand?
I think. You know what? I was probably looking to better understand how I could deal and manage the ups and downs of the emotional strain that this dissection had put on me. Um, and how to manage, at the time I went back to work. I was working at the time. I went back to work and trying to manage a stressful job, um, and figuring out, is this it for me? Like, is this 6 months? Is it a year? I felt my mortality more than ever,
Hmm.
having gone through a near death experience, which is really what it was.
Yeah.
And I think the first therapist, and I've found, I found someone about maybe 3 years ago that much better fits my personality. But the initial one, I think, got me through the hump of it's okay to talk about, seek out, people, that have gone through maybe not the same situation as you, but a similar situation. And even though I've always been very extroverted, always been a people person. For me to talk about my own, um, what's the word that I'm looking for? My own mortality and the fear that I had, um, I really needed to sit down and talk about that to help me overcome it. So I think having the conversation with someone, and given me a couple of tools, a few books to read, a few articles to read, really helped me because I didn't know where to go get the resources.
Yes. I mean, as you're talking, and I'm sort of asked the question, I'm also trying to sort of ask it of myself and kind of almost like, in terms of philosophy. And because I do think there's something very interesting there about something happens in our life, which is such a kind of earthquake. And then there's a tsunami after it that, that somehow we're kind of metaphorically blind, or we've lost all our bearings and everything like that. And what maybe I wonder if talking to someone can give us is some kind of pillar at that point. It's like someone who's going to like take off some of the pressure by going to, like, you just put it out there, don't you? You pay to put it out
Yes.
there, which is more difficult with family because you identify that thing that they're traumatized enough. But one of the the kind of ironies of family and close relationships is, by the nature of them, their intimacy and their closeness, we also sort of want to protect them. We know them very well. We know what their limits are, maybe, and it can be quite
Yeah.
difficult to go for that kind of solace because what's happened to you is also is such an earthquake within the typical structure of the family. And I
Yes.
think maybe we kind of instinctively know that when we go and when we see a therapist and we pay them, it's kind of like, as you probably discovered, you go into another kind of world, in that session, and you begin to realize, if it's a good therapist and there's trust, that you can put it all out there. And that can be a tremendous unburdening, I think, because,
Yeah.
never mind the work I do, I also spoke to a therapist afterwards. And yeah, I just found it sort of vital. I just wanted to talk and talk and talk about it. And perhaps you've also sort of noticed that, or we all have, when people have a grief or a bereavement of some kind, or a huge shock, they just often just need to keep talking about it, and that's fine.
Yeah. And you know what, John, I think, and also in talking to a therapist, they're not judgmental, right? They can't be judgmental. So whatever it is that I lay out, you're not going to judge me. You're going to, support me and help me and listen to me.
Mm,
Whereas, sometimes even friends and family, um, you could feel like you're judged a little bit.
yes.
And then, a lot of family, you know, will say, "It's okay." Trying to calm me down will say, "You know what? Everything is okay. It's gonna be alright. You're through the worst part of it." I don't think they understand what it's like every day, every week, every month.
It's a delicate issue, isn't it?
It
um
is. It's very.
how to navigate that. Yes, I
Yeah.
understand you completely. Yes, they want to be able to reassure you because they're partly needing to reassure themselves.
Yes. Yep.
And so there, fears in the elephant in the room, as I've been speaking about in these recent weeks, once again, is fear, isn't it?
Yeah. It absolutely. And I mean, I'll give you an example. In 5 days, I've got my annual CT and echo,
Okay.
and I think I might have mentioned to you when we spoke last, for the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to it, that's when I really start to feel it, because I'm concerned, I'm nervous. Was my blood pressure too high for, this period of time? Did is the aneurysm grown that they're keeping an eye on the type B? So, this is when for me, this is when the PTSD hits. And sometimes, I find my family saying, you're fine. You're going to be just fine. Take your afternoon naps if you need them, but you'll be okay. Everything is fine.
Yes,
And
and
you're
and
right.
and even as you were talking there, never mind, the therapy work I do, my instinct was to like want to put my arm around you and go, "You'll be fine, Mark. Don't
I know.
worry." You know, it's the
And
most
that's okay.
natural thing in the world, isn't it, for people to do? But
Absolutely.
yeah, it's in its own way, it's a very giving thing. But I completely understand you. It doesn't go into the heart of darkness, as it were.
Yes. No.
So you say you begin to feel it. What do you what in these in this period leaving up? What do you feel?
Um, I find myself I find myself sometimes going down a path where, okay, what could happen next? What would it look like? And what would it feel like if next Tuesday afternoon, my surgeon says the aneurysm is it's grown, and we now have to we're now have to go to Plan B.
Mm.
That's that's the fear, and I don't think about it. I mean, I think about it throughout the year, and several times, but it's usually, the couple of weeks leading up to my annual scan and echocardiogram where I really give it a lot more thought.
Yes, I'm with you 100% there, and I can feel the contradiction in me, because on the one hand, or at least I like to think I have therapeutic tools to help people, but I would be exactly the same, and I've had exactly those feelings of, like, when a scan's coming up and I know the blood pressure's been a bit iffy maybe or something, I'm thinking, well, has it maybe pushed at the walls too much, or that really stressful experience didn't do me any good, or I overstretched with that exercise. And then, yes, one starts to think about intervention. What would a second intervention be like, and how that would I have the energy to come back again? And yeah, I think it's so normal, and
Yes.
being able to talk about that, just get it out there with people, or as you say, with a therapist. Mm.
Yeah, that's why I think talking to a therapist and even being on some of the support groups, it's helpful because you quickly can see that you're not the only one. And for
Mm.
me, I hope that I could be an inspiration for people that are 2 months, a year, 2 years out to say, I'm 7 years out. Next month will be, well, July will be 7 years for me. And then when I meet somebody like yourself, I'm thinking, wow, okay, you're an inspiration to me because you're still you're still going. Initially, I was thinking, does this mean that my life expectancy does this mean that my life expectancy has severely decreased? And probably not.
Mm.
Probably not. And every year that goes by, and things are stable, then
Well, you're catching
there's
up
a
with
high
your life
likelihood.
expectancy anyway, aren't you?
Well, that's right.
Every
That's right.
year, and so am
If you
I.
wait long
Yeah,
enough, yeah,
yeah.
it's
And
gonna
there's no
happen.
doubt you can find data on the net, or I can, or whoever, and you can see some life expectancy data for people who've had this dissection. And one of my joke lines is that I'm past my sell by date.
That's
Um,
very good.
but just kind of keep on trucking,
That's it.
see what happens next. Yeah. Um, you sort of told me that you meditate. Is that something that you always did, or is
No,
that a development out of this experience?
that was a development out of this experience, and it was a development that came from a suggestion from a therapist saying,
Hmm.
you know what, why don't you start your day? Um, and this is when I've since retired, but this is when I was still working. You know what, before you get into your day and you hit the ground running, why don't you just, a good idea, maybe find an app, learn, understand, and how to meditate, and just have some very, peaceful time for yourself in the morning. And, it's interesting, John, the therapist that I still see, we were just talking about unrelated things that are unrelated to the dissection. And she said, you know what, Mark, I really think it would help you if you got back into meditating every morning. It's got to be, you go to the gym very consistently. Make meditation part of your daily routine.
Mm.
And I've gotten better, but I got away from it, then I got back, and now
Sure. Yeah.
it's not a daily thing for me, but
You
it
do it before
probably
you go
needs
to
to
the
be.
gym when you do it?
I do it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, let me play devil's advocate here. Sort of, again, a bit like therapy, meditation can come with this, oh, it's also hippie, and,
Yeah.
all of this sort of stuff. What do I need to meditate for? What is meditation anyway? You know, again, specifics. What does it specifically give you that you didn't have in your life beforehand, do you think?
I think it gives me time that I dedicate to myself, and it's uninterrupted time for me to just sit in peace and quiet. And that's really it. That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
I work on my breathing. I mean, I try to work on my breathing techniques. But even when I'm out getting exercise, there's always outside distractions. There's always people. There's always somebody saying hello, goodbye. There are always interruptions. So for me, it's the one time in my day where I know there will be no interruptions.
Okay, and what do? You sit in a chair or on a mat, or do you wear any
No, I sit.
special kind of meditation gear or something?
No, you know what? I usually sit in a chair or on a couch. No, I'm not
Okay.
flexible enough. I'm not flexible enough to sit on the ground with my arms crossed and my legs crossed. If I did that, I'd probably never get up, John. So no, I sit in a very comfortable
Yes,
couch, and many times I fall asleep,
sure. Yeah, I know.
which
I
is,
know.
you know,
And how long would you, if you set yourself a time, you don't set a clock or anything, you just decide to go for how long it feels
te-
right? Or
10 minutes, 10 minutes.
yeah. And do you have a particular routine you go through?
No, I usually use an app. There's so many apps out there that
Mm.
I use an app.
So you play that off your phone?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, maybe you've done this, but I mean, I think there's plenty of evidence out there that it certainly doesn't do any harm for blood pressure. No, just that breathing, just
Yes.
that tranquility, um, and it can put a very different kind of perspective on things, can't it? Because
Yes.
I was only thinking about this, about myself last night. That sometimes I have this kind of bit of a loop where just before I go to bed, I think it's gone on for years. Something will pop into my mind, and I'll start to think about it or worry about it or something like that. Having spoken last week about what good does worry do, but things like meditation, which actually we can do at any point in the day. I mean, even when
Sure.
you were talking about meditation, I was suddenly paying more attention to my breathing. It can be a tremendous way of kind of, let's say, heading things off at the pass, as it were, before they climb and before they mount, because
Yes.
we get into that, right? If I've got a problem with this, I'm just going to go and sit in a chair and I'm going to meditate about it.
Yeah. Even if you just sit down for 2 minutes and just focus on your breathing, for me, it it makes a little bit of a difference because you're right. Before things might escalate, um,
Hmm.
you just catch it, relax, breathe a little bit, and in a minute or two,
Yes,
you're back to where you want to be.
because also what we're doing, particularly with scan anxiety and things, we're going, it's very cerebral, isn't it? We're creating situations, we're thinking. And what's quite good about breathing and things like that is it can help to slow the mind down. It can pause all of that kind of stuff, which can be so debilitating.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and we're perhaps sort of coming to the end of this sort of lovely chat. But one of the things that impressed me and is maybe relevant to all of us is you mentioned that you enjoy traveling and you travel a lot, because there's this issue of that people who with this condition, we worry that what happens if I go to another
Yeah.
country, or what about my meds and all this stuff, what about insurance? You're doing it, aren't you?
Yes. I traveled. Um, well, I mean, fortunately, I was able to travel back home. So after I had my surgery, I had a follow up appointment, and the surgeon cleared me to fly back from Hawaii to Los Angeles. And I, of course, my wife and I asked him, my kids, made sure it was safe for me to travel. And he said, there's no reason not to travel. There are plenty of people that get on a plane. That he has had to repair, that get on a plane and fly to Japan, fly back to, the United States. So he said, there's no reason not to fly. Um, 6 months almost to the day after I dissected, I went back to Hawaii. I had a business trip, but I met with the surgeon, and then since then we've been traveling. I mean, my family is all on the East Coast, so it's a 6 hour flight.
Mm.
I think about 8 or 9 months after my surgery. Now I timed my travel a little bit differently. I didn't and I don't like to take overnight flights. Um, I like to time it so I'm not exhausted at the end of the day or the end of the
Uh,
trip.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is if you take an overnight, it wrecks your sleep pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only time I've taken overnight is when I fly over to your neck of the woods. There's no other way. There's no other way to get there.
Unfortunately
So
not, no.
no, I spend
Yeah.
a day. I either spend a day and a night or a long night getting to Europe. But
Mm.
no, I realize that traveling is too important to me. It's too important to my wife. And I realize that it can be done very safely. I get up and walk. I wear compression socks. I get up and walk every 45 minutes or so. Um,
And what do you do? You
and
take you stock up on your meds, you plan your medications before you go, do you? For the duration?
yes, yes.
Okay. And you have a point of contact with a medical practice or a surgeon in the different countries you're going to?
Well, you know what? When I first started traveling uh, back, and we went to Europe, I just double checked and made sure where I knew where the closest medical facility was that had, um, that had the right surgeons, the right doctors, the right equipment in case I needed anything. But now I buy extra insurance.
Hmm.
So I don't take just, the insurance that comes from the airline or the hotel. I buy
Yeah,
my own
that's
separate
what
insurance
wise.
policy
Yeah.
for that trip, which gives me, a lot of uh I don't really care much about the airfare and the hotels. Um, Most of that I would get credited back, or I traveled so much that I still can use points. It's more about the medical, and I just make
Mm.
sure I found a wonderful woman that's a broker, an insurance broker that specializes in medical insurance, travel insurance. So I get
Oh,
it every
great.
time I go, and that
Yeah.
gives me, and I think it gives my wife the peace of mind that if God forbid
Mm.
something happens, I
Yes.
can get from point A to point B.
Well, and now across the pond, you have me, don't you, as a point
That's
of
right.
contact,
That's
and
right.
I can say that to all of you Americans, like, get out there and travel, see the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because, I can sort it out for you. Yeah. Uh, Okay. So I just want to bring Joshua in and say hi to everybody who may be listening out there, and whether Joshua has any comments from anybody or any hellos for
Well,
us.
we have some hellos. Natalie from Canada and Molly out of California has dropped in to say good morning.
Morning.
Molly
Good
says,
morning.
Smart travel is comfortable, responsible travel."
Yeah.
I agree with her.
Well said, Molly.
Yes.
Carry on.
Okay. Um, it's been lovely talking to you, Mark. Is there anything that you feel that I've left off and that you'd like to sort of bring in yourself? I mean, I suppose one thing we haven't really talked about is, this thing of like good days, bad days, because in fact, when we spoke the first time, you said you weren't having your greatest day, you didn't really have the energy for the gym. Is that one of the things you think we have to come to terms with a little bit with this condition, that for no particular reason, some days will be easier than others?
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think we should be making excuses. If we have a bad day, we deserve to just it's okay to have a bad day. And if a bad day means, you need to take a 2 hour nap at 3 o'clock in the afternoon
Totally.
and you don't feel like cooking dinner, you want to just bring in dinner, that's okay. So I think, at least for me, um, accepting that not every day is going to be a great day, and our energy, not only for what we've been through, but for the meds that we're on, our energy is not going to be the same every day. And it certainly won't be what it was, at least for me. It's not what it was pre-dissection. And learning to just accept that and understand it's okay.
Yes. Well,
Don't
I think
make excuses.
the key thing there is, by not accepting it, we make it worse, because we build tension in.
Yes.
We get fed up with ourselves. We get then maybe a bit depressed and
Yep.
right. So this is what it is, and I'm a great believer, and for myself and for other people, I know it's not always possible in every situation, but if you feel the need to sleep and you can sleep, rest. Whether it be 11 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, what quite amuses me is, so obviously the Spanish are famous for their siestas, and it can be a great way of living, because I've had a siesta before today, and then I will work on into the evening, and it splits the day in two, which I quite like. But also they have a word for when you have a siesta in the morning and you get to about 11:30 or whatever, and you think, it could really do with a snooze. They call that a donkey siesta. Which I really like. I'm having a donkey siesta.
That's great.
So yes, but I think you're on the money there. That and it's very unpredictable, and I think that's one of the things that can make acceptance quite hard, especially early on. Is like, what's going on here? I was fine yesterday and had bags of energy, and today it's just not there.
Yep. You know what though, John? That brings up one other thing. I think also planning and understanding what the evening is going to bring, or the next day, and preparing yourself. So if you're going to have a late evening, or you have a dinner, and maybe take it easy that day. And I had it yesterday. I went to a baseball game last night, and I knew it was going to be a late night and a long night. So I planned my day so I could be home on my couch for an hour. And I know that's all I need is an hour to just, re-energize.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing is, planning, and not just, I don't take things, I don't take things with a grain of salt. If I know I'm going to be doing something, I try to plan for it. I can't just wing it like I used to.
Yeah. Wise words. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely with that. You're probably better at me than that, by the sound of it. I sometimes make it up a little bit as I go along, and I think sometimes my time management in that respect could be better. But you see, they always say, if you are working with somebody as a counselor, always ask yourself what they're teaching you, what they're bringing to you. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And we'll start to close now, Joshua, but I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been great. And
thank you
for being so honest with us and being so straightforward. Thank you very much for your time, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story.
And
thank you.
With some final thoughts here, Molly's like, okay, John, I'll see you next week. She also goes on to say, it's okay to say no. We have earned that privilege. And she loves donkey siestas.
There you go. Yeah,
Wonderful.
there could be there'll be an app or something in that, or at least a cuddly toy for it. Okay, then. Well, thank you very much to everybody. Right. Thank you, Joshua.
Thanks.
And bye, Mark. See you again.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Bye, Josh.